The following is intended to be an introduction to the simplest form of the noun and verb in the biblical Koine Greek system. So let's dive in. There are some terms we need to define as we begin. Sometimes when we talk about verbs, we discuss paradigms. What we mean by that is that there are different forms of the verb with different prefixes, or those things that are affixed to the front of a verb, and different suffixes, those letters that are fixed to the end of the verb. These change depending upon the usage of the verb and also the type of verb. So all of these different changes together we refer to as a paradigm, or as sometimes it's called, the principal parts of a verb. So we learn verb paradigms. In nouns, we don't call them paradigms, even though there are also different forms of the noun with different endings. We call these declensions. There are three major declensions, or if you want to consider them, three families of nouns in Greek. We will start with the second declension, which is the easiest and the most common, where the nouns are predominantly masculine. So we are looking at paradigms of verbs, or declensions of nouns. The ending of a noun in Greek is marked by three particular aspects of the noun: its usage in the sentence, whether it is singular or plural, whether it is masculine or feminine. Typically, masculine and feminine is marked by having completely different vowels. Singular and plural is marked by the ending itself, as is its usage in the sentence. There are four main usages in a sentence. There is the nominative, which typically refers to the use as a subject or a sentence or a phrase, such as he being the nominative. He threw the ball. He is the subject doing the throwing, so he would be in the nominative. Accusative typically refers to the object of the verb, what's actually being thrown. He threw the ball, so ball would be in the accusative case. Prepositions often will take the accusative as well. Genitive typically refers to the type, or usually words that are marked by of, like the city of Banjul. It's telling us the type of town, or which town, or the genus of the town. Genitive, referring to the genus, the type. So Banjul here would be in the genitive, the city of Banjul. Dative refers to instruments or the direct object. So it's not that he threw him. He didn't throw him, he threw the ball, but he threw the ball to him. So the him is the indirect object. That's who the ball is being thrown to. So in this case, he would be in the nominative, since he's the one throwing. Ball would be in the accusative, because that's what's being thrown. Him would be in the dative, because it is the indirect object. And if we were to add in, he threw him the ball in the city of Banjul, Banjul would be in the genitive. Or in our sentence here, he threw him the ball of string. Of string, string would be in the genitive because it's the type of ball. He threw him the ball of string. We typically refer to the sentence usage form as the case, the singular or plural as the number, and the masculine and feminine as the gender. So these three markers are all indicated by the ending of a particular noun: case, number, gender. Here is the actual chart of the second declension, mostly masculine nouns. You'll notice that I have it set up as nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, going down the list that way. Some grammars like to go nominative, genitive, dative, accusative. This is how I learned it: nominative, accusative, genitive, dative. So this is how my mind works. It just depends on which grammar you're using. In the singular, we have the os, on, o. And you'll notice that the o, the dative, has a iota underneath the omega here, indicating that it is dative. That is not true of the plural dative, which is ois. In some ways, you could almost think of it as the iota joining with the rest of the suffix to give us ois, or omicron iota sigma, ois, but still you have a iota of some sort in that dative ending. You'll also notice, though, there is an iota in the nominative plural ending, oi. So we have os, on, o, nominative, accusative, genitive, dative. And we have plural, oi, us, on, ois. These are our 8 endings, singular, plural, nominative. So in the example before, he threw him the ball. He, him, and ball are all singular, so we would use all of the words endings in the first column. If we were saying they threw them the balls, then we would use the plural endings, or a mix thereof if it was a mixture of singular and plural words. But again, this is the declension for second declension. Nouns in this declension, which are typically always masculine, will have these endings. So the logos from John chapter 1 is a nominative singular, logos. You could notice if we were to say to the word, we would say lago using the dative because it's going to the word. Words would be lagoi, or if it's to the words, lagois. Now there are some words that show up in the second declension that are not masculine. For instance, parthenos, which means virgin, is actually a feminine word. Biblios, book. Chronos, time. Eremos, desert. Those are actually all feminine words, and there are a few that show up even in the second declension. So they're not all masculine, but they're mostly masculine within this second declension. Even though these feminine words have the second declension ending, that doesn't make them masculine. They're still feminine. They just look masculine. The best thing to do in Greek, unfortunately, is simply to memorize these charts, to memorize them in the order that they stick in your mind. I memorize them as os anu o, oi us on ois, but you can memorize them in whichever order you want, as long as you know which ones go with which case, nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, which ones are singular, which ones are plural. Each of the declensions in Greek also have their own definite article. The definite article is the word the, the in English. The indefinite article, which is a or a in English, or an, is not marked in Greek. Only the definite article, the. You'll notice that the definite article here on this chart is exactly the same as the endings from the second declension, with the difference being that there is no hyphen to the left of each letter to indicate that these come at the end of a word. Instead, these are standalone words. In the accusative, genitive, and dative, that little hyphen mark that showed in the previous slide that the letters come at the end of a word has been replaced by the letter tau, the letter T. So instead of on, we've got ton, and tus, and tu, and tone, and toe, and tois. Other than that, it's exactly the same. We've just simply replaced that little marker for the word with tau. In the nominative singular, there is no sigma after os. Instead, it is simply a. Although there's an apostrophe here, that apostrophe will be found in the text directly over the omicron. I was not able to do that on this slide. I had to kind of put it slightly next to it to get it to show up. But it is what we call a rough breathing mark, which we talked about in previous lectures. This is an apostrophe that curls to the right. If it curled to the left, it simply wouldn't be pronounced. It would just be written. But here, because it curls to the right, it is actually pronounced. So this is pronounced almost like an H, ha, or hoi. If we were to spell this out, we would actually spell it H-O or H-O-I. So in the nominative singular, it's not os, it's ha. And in the nominative plural, it's not oi, it's hoi. And then in all the rest of them, it's the taf, ton, tus, tu, tone, to, tois. In the rest of the nouns that are feminine, but with the masculine endings, they will actually have a completely different definite article. Actually, a definite article from the first declension that reveals that it's a feminine because it won't take ha, parthenos. Instead, it will be he, parthenos. The he being the feminine, which we'll learn in a different lecture, the feminine definite article. So here, this is specifically a masculine definite article for use with the second declension. Ha, hoi, and then tau with all the rest. Again, you simply have to memorize this, but it's easier to memorize it because we've already memorized the actual endings of the nouns in this declension. Now we're just changing it slightly so that they stand by themselves. prior to the word that they're modifying. Now that we've completely exhausted your mind when it comes to nouns, let's move on to verbs. Keeping in mind you can pause here and solidify the content for nouns before moving on to verbs. But before we talk about verbs, we need to talk about verb types. And there are many different types of verbs and many different categories that define those types. We have person, which is first person, second person, or third person. That's either first, I, or me, or we. Second person, you, or you all, plural. Or third, he, she, it, they, them, that person over there. We can also talk about gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter, although typically in verb types, the actual ending will not change with gender, which is helpful. We also have number, singular or plural, and we have what's called aspect. This is present or past or future. There are actually multiple different aspects, some of which you may not be familiar with in your particular language, but you probably use them without really thinking of them. At least that's the case in English. We use these, we just don't typically refer to them by these different names. So this may expand your knowledge of even your own language as you learn about the Greek system. We also have mood, which is fairly unusual when we talk about other languages like English. However, again, we still use these, we just don't really talk about them. We have the indicative, which is the typical mood. We also have the imperative, which is a command. But we also have conditional, like words that start with might. I might do this. That's its own mood in Greek. It's called the subjunctive. We actually use this in English. We just don't really call it that at times. And we have the optative, which is a wish or a hope. It's even more conditional than the subjunctive. And we'll get to those in future lectures. We also have the voice, which is active. I'm throwing this. Or passive. I am being thrown. We also have in Greek, we have the middle, which could kind of go either way, and it's kind of its own unique category. It's somewhat passive, but also somewhat active, and we'll get to that when we come to it. You just need to know that as I talk about these different categories, this is what I'm referencing. When I talk about person, gender, number, aspect or tense, mood, and voice, I'm referring to these particular categories. And we'll define this again and again and again as we move forward through the different types of verbs. This is the simplest form of the verb in Greek, the present indicative active. The present is the aspect or the tense. It is present tense. The mood here is indicative. It's just indicating. It's a general boring type of verb. It's just straight indicative mood. And it is active voice. So this is something we are doing. So in this particular verb, luo, I am loosing. I am not being loosed. That would be passive. I'm doing the actual loosing of whatever it is that's being loosed. We always put the verb in the first person singular. So in this case, luo, that's how we find it in the dictionary. And so we refer to this as the dictionary form or the lexical form. Even if we are looking at a particular verb that doesn't show up in the first person singular in the Bible, we will still put it in that first person singular in the dictionary, in the lexicon. So we always know where we can find it. We can always find it under luo. Here we have, in the second person, we have you, lues, epsilon, iota, sigma. That's marking the second person singular. In this particular paradigm, it could be either masculine or feminine. So the you could be a boy, the you could be a girl. Same with the third person, lue. That's a he, that's she, that's it. It's just singular third person. When we head over to the plural first person, now we're talking about we loose, luamen. And then second person plural, lueta, you loose, but it's not you singular, this is you plural, y'all loose. And then third person plural, they, luusen. And you'll notice that the nu there is in parentheses because sometimes the nu drops. Doesn't happen very often, but occasionally it'll drop so that instead of loosen, you get luuse, and it just ends. Typically that doesn't happen, but occasionally it will, which is why we have it in parentheses. I still memorize it as usen, because that's just how I memorize it. So these endings will be the same in every present indicative active verb. O eis e amen eta usen. That's our paradigm. And I would memorize it simply that way. O eis e amen eta usen. So that regardless of what the verb is that shows up at the beginning here, I can add o eis e amen eta usen to the end of it. Luo or balo or any other verb that I'm given, I know what endings to put on that particular verb. Well, that brings us to the end of the basic noun, the second declension noun, and the most basic verb, the present indicative active. We've got a lot more to cover. We've got several more declensions to cover, many more different types of verbs to cover, but this is at least a beginning to get you started to understand the way the system works. We have different declensions of nouns, 4 different cases, different genders, different numbers, plural, singular, masculine, feminine, neuter. We have different verb paradigms with mood, aspect, tense, voice, gender, number. We'll get into all that again as we keep going through these different paradigms and these different declensions, but that's at least a start here to get you exposed to the noun and the verb as we move forward.